Hey guys, welcome back. This is a second video of React Native series. In the first video, we have talked about what is React Native, what are the prerequisites of React Native and the environment setup. Okay. In the end, we got a project which is created by the init command. Okay. So in the today's videos, we will be talking about project structure. Okay, so what all files are automatically created and what are files we have to create for an industry standard project structure. Okay, so without wasting any time, let's get started. Okay, so let's understand first what all the files which are already created by the init command. So the first folder is the underscore underscore tests underscore underscore. Okay, so this contains one file called as app-test.js. So what is this file about? So this file is about testing. Okay, so if you want to test something on your root component, that is your app component, then this you can do this in this file. Okay, so if you have not started with the testing yet, so you don't need to touch this file. Okay, so if you know a testing library such as jest or enzyme, then only you can go ahead and make changes in this file. Okay, so I will be making a separate video of the testing using jest and enzyme so that you understand testing better. For now, you just understand that this folder is for the testing purpose of the root component, which is the app.js. Okay, so this was the folder for testing. Okay, next is the .vs code folder. So this folder is created by Visual Studio Code, which is our editor. Okay, we don't need to use this folder anyhow. Okay, no need to make any changes in this type of folders. Okay, next is Android and iOS. Okay, so I told you our app can work in both Android and iOS. Okay, so these two folders are basically created when you use a React Native CLI and not when you use an expo. So I used React Native CLI. Because of that, these two folders are there in my project structure. Okay, so what these two folders contain, this folder contains basically .java and .mnh files for Android and iOS specifically. Okay, so for Android, if you'll see, there is a main activity.java file and main application.java file. So these are the Java file related to Android. And if you will go to the iOS folder, inside this you will get your delegates, app.delegate.m and main.m. Okay, so when we have to go to this folder, once there is an Android or iOS native module that you have to integrate in your app, then only you have to go and touch these folders. Okay, so these folders are mostly untouchable, okay, 99% of the time. But if you have any requirement which definitely requires a native thing, okay, like suppose you have to use a camera or something like that, okay, and you are not getting any particular library in React Native for that, then you can go for making a bridge and you can go for native modules. Until then, these two folders should be kept as it is. Okay, the next folder is the node modules folder, which contains all the dependencies that your project has. Okay, so if you'll see, there is a jest already there, React Native already there, React Native community already there. So these are the folders which your project uses. Okay, so this is a very big folder. Okay, and because of this, the dependencies are getting loaded in your project. Okay, so first you have to take care that you have the node modules folder created. If not, then you have to write a command. That command is the npm install. So that will install the node modules folder for you automatically. Okay, so this is about the node modules folder. Okay, then there are some configuration files. Okay, these configuration files are untouchable files. We don't need to do any change inside this. So buckconfig, editor config, nothing to change on this. It should be as it is. It should be untouched. Okay. Next is the Eslint Rc.js. Okay, so for those who don't know what is Eslint, Eslint is basically a tool to check the syntax of JavaScript. Okay, so whatever JavaScript you write inside your application and you want to check whether that syntax is correct or not, and it will going to throw some error or not. Okay, you can go for Eslint. Okay, so this Eslint is already installed in the init command. Okay, so how you can check if there is any error or not? So you have to go to the command prompt and you have to write npm run lint. So what this will do is this will check your project with any errors or not, and if there is any error it will be showing it here. Okay, so now we don't have any errors, so it is not showing any errors. Okay, and if you want to fix that error, you want lint to fix that errors for you, then at that time you have to write npm run lint hyphen fix. Okay, so what it will do, it will fix the errors for you, whichever it can fix. Okay, whichever it cannot, it will show that this error cannot be fixable with lint. Okay, so this is about ESLint. Okay, so the two commands is what? npm run lint, and if you want to fix it, you have to write npm run lint hyphen fix. Understood? Okay, so this is the file basically for that ESLint. Okay, then there is a configuration file, no need to do anything on this. Then there are some git files, git attributes and git ignore. Okay, so git attribute, you don't need to change anything. Git ignore is basically for ignoring the folders that you don't want to push inside your git. Okay, so these are the folder, like load module is a very big folder and you don't want that folder to go in your git repository, right? So that's why it is getting ignored by this git ignore file. Okay, so these are some of the git attributes. You don't need to change anything until and unless you have to ignore something, you have to add it here. Okay, so this is the git ignore. Then next is the Prettier. Okay, so what is Prettier? Okay, so Prettier is a extension, okay, for beautifying your code. Okay, for beautifying your code. So if you have written some code, like in the app.js, you have written some code and you have kept it like this. Suppose this is not in a proper format or manner. Okay, so what Prettier does is, Prettier, see, once I save it, it came back to the original position. So who is doing this? Prettier is doing this. So Prettier makes sure that your code is properly structured and properly shown in the screen. Okay, that is the use of the Prettier. Okay, then next is the watchmanconfig. This is a configuration file, we don't need to do anything on that. Okay, then app.js. In the app.js I have imported a React from React. I've imported some elements from the React native. I have used a functional component which is returning a JSX. So what is a JSX? Basically it is a JavaScript XML. Okay, so you can write JavaScript XML inside this return statement. Okay, and then you have to export this component, because if you want any other component to import it, you have to export it from here. Okay, so this app component is been used inside the index.js, right? So app registry.register component. So what it does is basically it registers your first component, which is the app component, and this app component is coming from this dot slash app, and if you will control and click on it, it will go to the particular component which you are using. Okay, so the entry point of your application is the index.js. In that it will register your first component, which is your app, which is coming from this component app.js file. Inside this there is an app component and you are rendering your first view inside this. Okay, so what is a view? View basically is a div. Okay, so we will be talking about these JSX components later. Okay, for now just understand that this is a component file, okay, which is a functional component, and it is rendering a view called as hello world. Okay, Okay, next is the app.json file. Okay, so app.json file contains the name and the display name of your project. Okay, so my name is YouTube React Native Hello World name, and the display name is also same. Okay, so you can change it based on your requirement. You can change it. Okay, so this is app.json file. Then next is the Babel config.js. What is a Babel? Okay, so Babel is basically a transpiler. Okay, so what do you mean by transpiler? It converts your ES6 code into JavaScript code. Okay, so suppose you have written some ES6 code inside your JavaScript, then it will transpile and make it into a common JavaScript code. Okay, that's Babel for you. So what is a Babel? Babel is nothing but a transpiler for converting an ES6 code into a JavaScript code. Okay, so you can use ES5, ES6 features inside your application, and the Babel will convert that into a normal JavaScript for you. So this is the configuration file for that. Okay, so you don't need to change until and unless you want to. Okay, then index.js we have already talked about. Then this is a metro.config file. So this is one of the configuration file. You don't need to do anything on this configuration. Okay, then the last two files are package.json and package-lock.json. Okay, so if you open package.json, it will be going to show you all the basic dependencies and dev dependencies you have in your project. So currently we have two dependency, which is the React and React Native. Okay, so React version is 17.0.1, which is the, I hope is the latest one, and 0.64.1. This is the latest React Native projects that we have done. Okay, and dev dependencies is there. So in dev dependencies you will have the dependencies which you are required for your development purpose, like Eslint you required, Jest you required. So we have talked about Eslint, we have talked about Jest and all, right? So this is for testing purpose. This is a tool basically for getting the errors checked. Okay, so these all are the dependencies used. Okay, so these are the basic scripts which are there. Okay, so for example, we ran the command npx react-native run-android, right? So that command is basically used for running your Android application. This command is used to run in your iOS application. This command is used for starting your server. So these are the commands which is stored in the package.json file. Okay, and there is a library called as Jest for testing purpose, and all the configuration will be set here. Okay, so this is a package.json file, and there is one more file called as package-lock.json. Okay, so what does this file contain? This file is basic tree of your dependencies. Okay, so what do you mean by tree? Is, for example, you are using this Jest transform dependency of version is 26.6.2. resolved means from where it is getting downloaded from the registry.npmjs.org file. Okay, so inside that you have a file, this file, and you are getting this particular dependencies from here. Okay, then what all these requires? Okay, so means this library is dependent upon these libraries. Okay, so that is called as a tree. Okay, so like a family tree. So family tree has a grandfather, then father, then son, right? Like that, this is the grandfather and these are the fathers, and then if that has more children, then it will be shown here. Okay, like that. So this is basic tree like structure, which is a package-lock.json file. Okay, so you don't have to do specifically going here, you can't change it, right? Okay, you cannot change it, you have to update using npm only. Okay, so you have to write npm install and then your package name and whatever version you want to download for your project. Okay, so these are the package JSON and package log JSON file. Okay, so I understood the difference between the two. Difference is it stores a tree. It stores as a tree which has a grandfather, father, and children. Okay, and package.json is basic dependencies with the versions. Okay, so these are the basic folders which we are currently using in our app. Okay, now let's jump in and see what are structure we need to create for our files. Okay, so the first folder that you have to create is the src folder. So src means source. Okay, so the first folder is the source folder where you will keep all your files where you want to do the development. Okay, okay, in this src folder, okay, the first folder which I'm going to create is the asset folder. Okay, so what do you mean by assets? So here you can keep your fonts, your images inside the assets folder. Okay, so in the assets folder you have to create two folder. One is the font, and in the assets folder you have to create one more folder called as images. Okay, so in the src I have created an assets folder. Inside this I have kept font and images. Okay, so you can keep all your fonts, ptf fonts, and images, kpg images and png images inside this. Okay, so first folder you understood, src assets. Okay, so let's write the hierarchy. Okay, so src is the first folder we created. Inside src we created assets folder, and inside assets we created font and images. Okay, okay, so this was about assets. Okay, next folder that you have to create is the component folder. Component folder. Okay, so inside this component folder, what you need to do, you need to create two folders. Okay, so one folder is called as a common component. Common component. And the second folder that you have to create is the screen component. Okay, so what these two folder do is, so if you want to keep any common component, you can keep it inside this folder. If you want for any screen component, you can store it here. So for example, a button. Okay, so button is a common component. It will be used in multiple screens, right? So you can create a new file. Inside this you can write button.js, and inside this you can create your button. Okay, inside this you can create your button and you can use that button from here. Okay, and screen component means a particular component which is reused. Okay, and then you can store it inside the screen component. Okay, so for example, the search bar. Okay, the search bar will be used in many pages, right? So you can create a new file called as search.js, and you can create your search part inside this, and you can use it from here. Okay, so you understood. So the next thing we created is the component folder, right? Component folder. Inside this component folder we created common component, and we created screen component. Okay, so this is the next folder, component folder. Okay, okay, these two are done. Now what next? Okay, so what next? So next folder you will be creating is for the navigation. Okay, so just select the source and click on new folder and create a navigation folder. Okay, so what this navigation folder contains, it contains all the information of your navigation. Okay, so we will be using a React navigation library for that. Okay, so I will be creating a separate video for navigation in React Native, like how we can go from one screen to another screen using React navigation. Okay, so this folder is basically for keeping your navigation stuff inside it. Okay, So these three folders are done. Okay, now the next folder that you have to create is the scene folder. Okay, so you can keep your name as scene or screens. Okay, so what does this scenes means? Scenes means the your screens that you are going to display. Okay, so here you can create, for example, you have a login module. Okay, login module everyone has. So what you can do, you can create a new folder inside this called as login. Okay, inside this login folder, you can create a file called as login.js, which will be your file. Okay, login.js, and here you can write your login code. Okay, and here you can create one more file for styling. So let's say login dot style dot js. Okay, so this file is for the styling purpose. Okay, and if you want to write your test cases, then you have to create one more file which is called as login dot test dot js. Okay, so this file is for the testing file. Okay, so like for the login folder, you created login.js, login.style.js, and login.test.js, right? Okay, like that you can create for some other things, right? For example, there is a home page. So for that, you have to create a new folder called as home. Inside that home, you have to create home.js. Then you have to create home.style.js, and the lastly you have to create home.test.js. Okay, like that you can do for every screens that you have, every scenes that you have. Okay, so you understood this? Yeah, so this was the next folder. Okay, so let's write it down. The next folder we created was navigation for creating our stacks. Okay, the next we created is the scenes folder, and you can call it screens also. Inside that I created a login folder. Inside that we created login.js slash, we created login.style.js and login.test.js. Okay, so this is the scenes folder. What next? Okay, so these folders are done. What next? So next we have to create a folder for our state management. Okay, so you can give so if you are using a redux, so you can give as a redux state folder. Okay, so state management. Okay, all the things related to state management will be stored in the redux state folder. Okay, so for those who don't know redux, so redux is a state management library in javascript. So what is a state? State is basically for storing some particular information of the components. Okay, first is the action folder, which is used for storing your actions. Okay, then you have to write a folder for the reducers folder. Okay, and the third, you have to create the folder for the your middleware. Okay, so it can be either saga or thunk. Okay, it can be either saga or thunk. You can use saga also, you can use thunk also. Okay, so I will be creating a separate video how to use redux in your react native application. Okay, so redux folder is done. Okay, so redux folder, so you created redux state folder. Inside this redux state, you created action, then you created reducer, and then you created saga. Okay, so this is the next folder, redux state. Okay, what is the next folder? Okay, so next folder is for APIs, so you can call it as APIs. Okay, so what APIs means, you can create the files where you can call the API. So what is API? Application Programming Interface. It is used for communicating your app to your server, right? To your database. Okay. So here I can create a new file, say login.js, and I can keep all the API calls of login page here. Likewise, I can keep all the home page in the home.js file and so on. Okay, so this folder is for keeping the API calls separate. Okay, so this is the API folder. What is the next folder you have to create? Okay, so the next folder that you have to create is the styles folder. Okay, so what is this styles folder? Here you can keep your common styling. Okay, so for example, you have some style which is used in many different components, then you can create a styles folder here. Okay, and here you can create a file, let's say colors.js. Okay, so inside that you can store all your colors. Okay, your theme color, black color, white color, all in one place. We can store in the colors.js file. Okay, so this is there, and then you can create a new file called as style.js for common styling. Okay, so this is the styles folder. Okay, where you can keep your common styling and your colors inside it. Okay, next is what? Next is the file. Okay, so here you have to create a new file called as store.js. So for those who know Redux, they will know store, right? So store is basically the central hub of your application. Okay, so you have to create a store.js file and you have to create a store here. Okay, so that we will do when we will learn Redux. Okay, so these are the folders which we created. Okay, so let's write it down. So reduxstate we are done. Then since we are done, then we created a folders for APIs. Then we created a folder for styles. Okay, where we created color.js file and style.js file. Okay, and the last thing we created is the store.js. So I have not created any folder for store.js because it is a central store and it should be kept in the Src folder as it is. Okay, so this is the folder structures that you have to create before going into the application development.